Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf here. No Gavin today, but I am joined by a very special guest. I have John Schmilk of the Bank Shot podcast, and we're doing a little home and home action here, this game recap here, and then I'm going to be on the Bank Shot today as well. So once you get done listening to this episode of Locked On Knicks, definitely check out the Bank Shot. But for now, we're talking about the Knicks loss 111-98 against the Pacers on the road. It was not pretty. We got lots to talk about. Maybe at least one positive will be that RJ Barrett still looks really awesome. So we're going to get into that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome into Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving community since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. I am Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, and I am writing for Clutch Points about the Knicks this year. I am, in fact, not loving what the Knicks have been doing right now. And I am joined by John Schmilk, who hosts the Bank Shot podcast on WFAN. And as I mentioned, we'll be doing sort of a home and home here. So I'll be on John's pod later today as well, or actually maybe in your feeds right now if you're listening to this on Thursday. John, how are you doing? And how are you feeling after this latest debacle by the Knicks here?
I'm good, man. But you know what? I'm going to fight back. I'm not going to call this a debacle. I feel like Knicks fans have gotten so high on themselves after the hot start to the year that we've kind of lost sight as to what this team is and where we are. Like, we assume that after 5 games or 6 games, they were going to be a 58-win team and just roll over teams that they're more talented than. I just don't think that's where they are, where the Knicks are and what they're going to do consistently. And look, you're going to have games where you get to the end of it, the Knicks shoot 5 of 24 from 3. The opponent shoots 16 of 41. And guess what? Those games are going to be nearly impossible to win. And I'm not sure the game is that much more complicated than that, to be quite honest with you.
So I guess my only pushback on that, right, would be, I get where you're coming from. Like, cold nights happen. Oftentimes they coincide with hot nights for the other team. And then you just kind of end up where the Knicks were tonight, which is just getting spanked from basically the opening to the closing whistle, despite the fact that they got it within, I think the closest they got was 3 points at any given point in this game, outside of, the first minute or so, obviously. But, I think for me, it kind of has to do somewhat with just the fact that this team, their identity last year was, they didn't have the most top end talent. And Julius Randle did everything that he was supposed to do, everything that he was supposed to do and more. And, really led this team to that improbable 4-seed finish. But the calling card of the team was basically like, we're going to be like just completely on top of you all game, just unrelenting. We're going to play fantastic defense. And you know what? We don't have that talented of an offense, but a lot of nights we're going to score just enough points to beat you, and we're going to hold you under 100 points or whatever. We're going to harass you on defense at all times. And that's how it's going to be this year. It just doesn't feel like that. I think that's my biggest issue, is that we've seen the tantalizing talent that this team has now, where it looks like, Kemba and Fournier definitely can still shoot the ball, which was the biggest things that they were brought in here for. RJ Barrett looks like he's taking a leap. Julius Randle at his best still looks like Julius Randle of last year. So you've increased the talent, and you have Mitchell Robinson back, who at his best has been a huge rim to turn again. But, you have this new talent on the team, but you're sort of, it looks like now you've lost that wire to wire effort that was always there last year. And that's been the biggest thing with these last couple games. And then also that Orlando game, and even some of the wins where they kind of got out to these big leads early with some hot shooting, and then just kind of, deflated from about the second quarter all the way through the end of the game, but still managed to pull out some wins. It just kind of makes me think, like, what's going on with this team? That, like, is it not just Knicks fans that got too too high and mighty after a hot start? Like, the Knicks themselves start to think maybe that they're more than they are at a certain point? Because I still think, regardless of the talent infusion, if they want to do anything like, their ceiling, which would probably be like a 50, 52, whatever win season or something like that, then I think they're going to have to really buckle down and realize, like, we have to still keep giving the same amount of effort we were giving all of last year. But I don't know. What do you say to that in rebuttal to that?
No, I think that's fair, and I think if there's anything you wanna be concerned about this year, it has to be the defense so far. Though, just in terms of this game tonight, the Knicks last year were more than happy to give up threes to Myles Turner. He just didn't hit them in their games against the Pacers, and he just happened to hit 7 of 10 tonight. If he shoots 4 of 10 instead of 7 of 10, and the Pacers score 102 instead of 111, you're probably sitting here saying, that's actually a pretty good defensive effort. You have 102 points. That's not bad, right? So I think it's a pretty small sample size still. I do think, with Walker and Fournier in the starting lineup, you have guys that are probably more concerned with offense than they are defense. And I think that's probably part of this, to be quite honest with you. I don't think Julius Randle has been, quite as good defensively. And I wonder how much is them trying to feel themselves out on the offensive side has, I'm not going to say taken focus away from the defense, but sometimes guys don't lock in as much on defense, which is more of an effort thing when they're still trying to figure things out on the other side. And I do think Randall specifically is still really trying to figure out what his role is with all the new offensive talent on the team. And maybe that's affecting him on defense a little bit. I'm not sure. I think, I've saw some people tweet after the game, oh, teams are starting to figure out the fact that the Knicks are trying to shoot a lot of threes and they're adjusting. I mean, what's the adjustment? I mean, to me, I don't buy that necessarily. I mean, if teams are going to overplay threes, then you got to drive the ball. I mean, the NBA is not rocket science that way. So, yes, I agree. I think the defense you worry about. I think the rim protection is still pretty good. I just think they probably need to, tighten up a little bit on the perimeter. And I think that takes time sometimes for teams to really lock in on exactly what they're supposed to do. Remember, these training camps now and preseasons aren't very long. So you hope that as the season goes along, the group will be able to lock in a little bit more together as the season goes. But yeah, look, I agree. I think the defense is the source of trouble if there is a source of trouble. And I think that is a fair thing to be concerned about.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I think it'll be something to keep an eye on. I mean, I guess one thing that is sort of, forgotten by myself and probably a lot of other people is the steps that the Knicks had to take last year to become the team that they eventually were by the end of the year. They started off as, at one point, basically a 500 team, and then they sort of figured things out, and their version of figuring it out was hovering around a game or two above 500 for a little while, and then dipping back to it, and then getting another game or two ahead. And then they ripped that 9-game win streak, and there was that like light bulb moment against the Grizzlies in that comeback, where then that sends them on that rocket ship towards the end of the season, and they end up the 4 seed when all said and done, after initially looking like they were, probably just going to hang around it at a 500 or so, and maybe be like the 7 or 8 seed and have to play through the play-in games and then probably get annihilated by the Bucks or something. So yeah, it was I mean, maybe that is worth keeping in mind going forward, that even last year, this took a while to get together. I guess you would just hope that they would be mostly there because of the amount of carryover of players, but they've already had to deal with some injuries, like at the center spot, which was such a crucial part to the team last year. They are completely trying to play a whole new way on offense, playing more like the Houston Rockets, of the James Harden era than than anything like the Knicks have put on in a number of years. So, in that respect, yeah, it's I think maybe it'll take some time and we'll eventually get there. But we got some more to talk about. I do just want to quickly remind everybody this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why would you want to endure all that pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning about your car and about all the details that you don't need? You kind of just need a part to get out of there. And then you got to wait for the person to order the part for you. It doesn't come in that day. And then, you have to go back to the store, you get the final bill, and it's like a ton of money. And you wonder why you didn't just go to the mechanic instead of going to the stupid auto parts store. That's where rockauto.com comes in, though. Why would you want to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership when you could just go to rockauto.com? On top of it, Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and their prices are reliably low for every customer, not just for mechanics. You're not going to get a different price than anybody else shopping through rockauto.com. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And if you decide to get something right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And today's show is also brought to you by betonline.ag. We are back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, well, not that anymore, but whatever. I don't like the Braves. Anyway, the NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right.
Still better than Houston. Still better than
right.
Houston
It is still better than Houston, I guess. So, there's like the lesser of two evils, but two evils nonetheless. I'm actually still a little salty that as a Mets fan that Houston cost the Mets their manager, who I loved, when they hired Beltran and then had to immediately fire him because of the stupid Houston thing. So, even Mets fans got some salt for Houston in that respect. At any rate, John, I think maybe if we want to talk about something happy here on a overall sort of unhappy occasion, another Knicks loss, it's that RJ Barrett is still looking really good. He actually, I guess, had almost what you could call a down game for him in this game compared to some of the games he's put on recently. 23 points, only shot 8 of 20 from the field, which again, is only down by the lofty standards he set for himself recently. 2 of 6 from 3 and 5 of 7 from the free throw line. He had 5 rebounds and 3 assists to just 2 turnovers, which that's good as well. His turnovers, for all of his great things he's been doing, the turnovers have occasionally gotten up more towards 4 or 5 recently. So it's good to see those down a bit too. How have you? Obviously you're guesting on the show today, so the people don't get to hear your opinion here about RJ every day. How do you feel about RJ in this game? But more broadly, how have you been feeling about RJ lately with this hot streak he's on?
Hey, look, his last 3 games have been fantastic, and just generally speaking with RJ, I buy in on the jump shot. I think he's figured that out. I think he's going to be a very good open 3-point shooter. I think if he's open, you feel very good about him making it. And I think the difference the last few games, I think there's a couple parts of this. One, I think teams have allowed him to get downhill in a straight line with his left hand with the runway, and he's actually been able to get some separation and clearing the defender's shoulders. And that's why I think his percentage at the rim is way up, especially the last 3 games. It's because he's getting higher quality attempts. He's not jumping into guys' chests trying to fling the ball over them. He's actually creating some separation. So I think the question now we have to ask ourselves going forward here now, is this a matter of these other teams just not protecting the rim well, and we're going to see this revert? Or has RJ figured something out? Because he went through a stretch last year. I don't have it in front of me, but he had 1 month last year, Alex, where he shot, I think, 60-something% at the rim, but then every other month he was like in the mid-40s or something like that. So, it all depends on, I think, how this continues, but I do think the jumper's real. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And if he's figured out a way now to create some higher quality attempts at the rim, because that's always been his problem to me. People say, oh, he doesn't finish well at the rim. It's because he's taking really difficult shots over big guys, jumping into the chest of guys through contact. Those are hard shots to make for any player, not just RJ Barrett. But I think during this stretch, he's created a higher quality attempts, which is why he's been more efficient. And I want to see more to see if he can sustain this, or once teams adjust and they start defending him a little bit more, to his left hand, how he's going to adjust to that reaction back to him.
Yeah, how do you speaking of the skills that he's added this year, one thing that I've kind of noticed that I don't even know if I've debuted this take on here yet is that I feel like he's using his natural gifts a little more this year, like his natural athleticism, his leaping ability and things like that. It's not necessarily coming through and like he's trying to posterize guys or anything. We could see that it's so obvious whenever you see him make one of his transition dunks that like he can do whatever the heck he wants athletically, as far as leaping ability and stuff like that. And if he wanted to posterize someone, he certainly could. But I think that he generally is stuck to a strategy of uh, being a little more ground bound, mostly for health purposes to keep his endurance up and stuff like that. And that's why we're able to see him play such high minutes and usually thrive more as the game goes on, because of his great conditioning. But I've kind of noticed this year, I feel like his burst is kicking in a little more. Like he's able to get around guys better. He's getting up just a little more on those finishes on the inside. So he generates just that smallest bit more of elevation, which gives him that little more vertical separation, which allows him to finish these looks that previously he would stay a little more ground bound and sort of he would still like kind of use his shoulder or use his strength to clear a little bit of space. But then because he wasn't going up super high with it, guys were able to recover a little better to him and meet him at the focal point of where he was trying to take the shot. Now I feel like he's elevating more. He's trying to get it more uh, put a little bit more arc on his shots sometimes if it's like a situation where he's trying to get to the rim and has his defender trailing him on the inside, or is even trying to just in situations where he has his defender beat, trying to get up higher, basically place the ball right on the box and get it right in for a layup. And I think that's really helping his finishing around there. But what have you seen like as far as the causes of the finishing getting better, you think?
Yeah. For me, his athleticism has always popped in transition, and that's always been his strength as a finisher, right? If you give him a runway where he can build up speed, get a running start, go full speed, he's always been able to elevate, dunk, and do a lot of things. But whereas athleticism to me never really bursts is in those short areas in the half court, right? When guys come off those high screens or pick and rolls and they're right up in his shirt, he has trouble getting started sometimes because I don't think he is, you know, he doesn't have the best start and stop, in my opinion, in terms of creating separation in those short areas, especially in the half court, traditionally. But I think this year he's done a better job of it, which is why I think he's getting those higher quality attempts and able to get some of that separation. Now, I think it's helped him a lot that the last few games, I think, have played a lot more off of him. I mean, we see him come around these screens and he's got a clear runway to the basket in a lot of these plays. And I think that plays into kind of his build up speed. I cover the Giants, and you talk about different receivers, right? Like a guy like DK Metcalf, right? He has great athletic gifts, but it takes him a little while to build up his speed and to get going. And once he does, he is a physical presence that's really difficult to stop. That's the type of kind of category I put Barrett in terms of the type of athlete that he is. Then you have a different type of athlete in the NFL. For Giant fans, let's say Kadarius Toney, where he's in these short areas and he can start and stop, and he goes from 0 to full speed in the blink of an eye. And I think Barrett has developed a little bit more of that this year in the half court, which is why he is getting, I think, some of those better looks at the rim.
Yeah, the first step has definitely been really lethal by comparison to how it was before. I think that RJ used to, I think the reason that they used to run those like pistol sets for him early in games, not to say they're not still running those with Mitch some, but I
Mhm.
think the reason that that became like a big habit last year was because that was the best way to get him some separation and get him going downhill towards the rim. We're seeing this year now that he's clearly worked on tightening his dribble up and working on his first step and his burst to be able to just kind of explode right past his defender and not even need those screens or those actions to get him freed up right away. And it's clearly paying dividends so far because he's been having, I mean, this has been as good of a 3-game stretch as we've ever seen from him. And if it's kind of portending things to come, then I think the Knicks and Knicks fans obviously are in for a huge treat as far as how good he could potentially be. But
And by the
we're
way,
gonna,
just I'll jump on you for 1 second, just real quick,
yeah.
so fans have this. Through 7 games, this is including the Raptors game, 78% at the rim in the 81st percentile, which for a non-big, that's a huge number. Huge
Oh
number.
yeah. I mean, that's literally what Mitchell Robinson does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. Typically you want to be in the 60 to 65% range, and that's considered good. So if you're shooting 78%, I mean, obviously I don't think that's going to hold up necessarily, but if he settles in somewhere around 65%, I mean, that's well above average at that point. And I think we're in really good shape. And with how good he shoots the three, I wouldn't be surprised if he can hold out at around 60 to 65% at the rim. He'll probably end up shooting like 55% and have like, I don't know, 60 true shooting for the year or something like that. It'll be good. It'll be a good
And then
time.
last year, by the way, just so fans understand, he was 50%. He was 55% at the rim, which is the 23rd percentile. So
Hmm.
that's a huge jump from last year to this year.
Yes, it is. All right, I'm gonna just take our second break real quick so we can come back and talk about some more stuff from this game and a little more big picture stuff too. But this episode of Locked On Knicks is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. I know I'll often drive out to go see my dad in Missouri over Thanksgiving. That's coming up soon. And if I go and do that this year, one of my favorite things is if I stay overnight and then get out, go in the next morning, stop at McDonald's, get a sausage McMuffin. It is tier one breakfast food forever. So, definitely get some McMuffins. It's the best thing at McDonald's, in this guy's humble opinion. So head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say Locked On Knicks watch party? I don't know who's saying it. I'm not saying it, but someone might be saying it. At any rate, I'm loving it. All right, and we're back to finish up our discussion about the Knicks loss here, 111-98 to the Pacers.
You're making
And
me hungry, man. You're making me hungry.
yeah, that McDonald's ad, I always find myself, we're usually recording this at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I find myself thinking like, should I get up tomorrow and go get a McMuffin in the morning? I don't know. Maybe one of these days. I've been holding off. It's not good for my waistline, just
No.
because I don't exercise as much during the next season. At any rate, John, I want to talk a little bit about Julius Randle. Because I want to know your thoughts on him. We've been talking about him kind of ad nauseum, so it'd be good to get a little bit of an outside perspective on Randle right now. How do you feel about him overall lately? I mean, I think in this game in particular, we sort of saw both sides of his like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde equation from this season, where there's been times where he looks mega engaged and like he's playing with a chip on his shoulder, but in like a good way, and like he's making winning plays on both ends of the ball, like the stuff we saw last year. And then there are other times where and this popped up in this game as well, where he'll he seems to get frustrated. And there was one possession that stood out to me where I was just like, this is peak like 2019 to 20 Julius Randle, and that's not a compliment. Which was there was one point where Domantas Sabonis and he were matched up, and Randle got the ball, kind of tried to like back Sabonis down a little bit or something, and Sabonis was like bothering him some and got him to pick up his dribble, and Randle thought he got fouled, so then he passed the ball out to whoever, and then immediately calls for it back after like on his way out, kind of like doing one of these where if Sabonis had been standing there and gotten whacked across the face, I mean, Randle was literally asking to get like a flagrant foul, but took his arm, kind of did one of these, and which if you're on YouTube, you can see that. And then got the ball back and then just proceeded to do the same exact thing over again, all the way up until the shot clock was basically expired. And then hucks up an attempt that didn't go in. I think he wound up taking a contested layup and got contested by both Sabonis and Myles Turner, and it just was not great. And so I don't know. It's been. I know there's only so many games. We just had Benji on, who I think has also been on your show and is great. And he kind of said, be patient with Randle. Like, it's only been a few games. He's earned enough goodwill to have a little bit of growing pains this year when, like we were talking about earlier in the show, there's so much new happening for the for the Knicks right now, as far as, probably the biggest guy affected is Julius Randle as far as how his role is being affected this year. And, so maybe it's just some of that, but it's, we're now, you could also say 8 games into the season is effectively almost a 10th into the season. And, it seems to be getting worse, not better by and large. But where do you stand with Randall right now and overall what we've seen from him this year?
All right, this is gonna seem like a bit of an oxymoron, but see if you can follow me on this.
Okay.
Last year, the Knicks were asking Julius Randle to do a lot more, so it was harder for him because he was being asked to do more. But I almost feel like in reality, it's harder for him this year because he doesn't have to do as much, and he's trying to figure out how he should attack, how often he should attack, and what he should do within the flow of the offense. So last year, he knew that he would have to score. So if you have a few bad shots here and there, if you're a Knicks fan, you live with it because you know that nobody else is probably going to get a better look than that, than Randall. This year, with Fournier, with Kemba Walker, with Derrick Rose here the whole year, with RJ Barrett playing better, other guys can get shots and maybe get shots better than that 15, 16-foot Randall fadeaway. So his 3-point attempts per game are actually a little bit up, 5.7 heading into this game against the Pacers as opposed to 5.5. So he's still shooting a 3. I thought he passed up on a couple in this game, which you don't like. I do think he's made a concerted effort to get all the way to the rim a little bit more. I would wish he finished those a little bit better. But I still think sometimes he just gets it in his head that, all right, I get the ball here and I'm going to get a shot off. And I think he still feels like in his head that the team needs him to do that, and that's still his role. When, maybe you can just get your shots in the flow of the offense now. Be the screen man and a pick and pop guy in a screen and roll. Be a roll man, grab an offensive rebound, get your points in transition where he doesn't necessarily have to create as much in the half court because there's so much more around him. Be more willing to pass out of something quick because you get the ball back. Things like that. So I think he's having a hard time transitioning from a year where he had to do everything to a year where they still need him to do a lot, but he doesn't need to take as many difficult shots to get there. And I do think that's a bit of a transition. And I do think we have to be patient with him and let him figure this out along the way because the 3-point shot's still falling. It was, 38% heading into this game. He's still over 6 assists per game. So the tools are there. He's just not being as efficient with it. And I think you hope it's just that 8-game stretch, like you mentioned, and that's something he can figure out along the way in terms of how he fits into this larger system.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that are still figuring it out, I agree with much of what you said, by the way. I mean, I think there is this adjustment for Randall that ironically it's harder for him to figure out how to be less involved and to still do
it
things.
is. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the main thing that I wish would come out of this would be that he would sort of just siphon off some of that energy that he used to have to expend on offense last year and spend it on defense.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the biggest area where he's regressed this year, more so than the offense. I can live with him taking some mid-rangers and whatever and that sort of thing and calling his own number to try to get in a rhythm. That's fine because that's what he's paid to do for this team. But the big thing is that he's looked very lost on defense at times. And one guy that surprisingly looked lost to me in this game on defense to some degree was Mitchell Robinson. And that's not something that I've said very much this year. I think he definitely still had his effect of rim deterrence at times in this game where guys would come into the lane and Mitch would be so, intimidating around there that he would just kind of scare them away. He also notched 3 blocks, but, I think it's partly game plan. I mean, the scouting report probably says just leave Turner open, and I'm sure that was their plan. And then, of course, he ends up hitting 7 of 10. But I did kind of find myself thinking, not even just on the Turner stuff, and this has been kind of something that's been kicking around in my brain for the last couple games, that Mitch has been not reading switches quite as well lately. He's been hanging back a lot more and not doing what he used to do, which was essentially like the thing that made him so scary before was that if he was in a pick and roll situation, for example, he would get out on the shooter, but not fully. He would kind of take like a half step towards them, would flash the arm up, and that shooter would go, "Oh crap, this isn't for me today," because I know that he can block a 3-pointer if I go to shoot one right now. And then they would either try to pass to someone else, further away from the play, or try to work it inside where Mitch was still close enough that he could easily recover. It was just there's a different dynamic to how he was playing defense. And right now, maybe it's still just him getting his legs back, or maybe this is like the one side effect that we're seeing of the added bulk that he has is that, now he can be more intimidating on the inside, but he can't shade as much towards the outside with a little bit of loss of quickness here. But something just feels different. I mean, how did you feel about Mitch in this game in particular? And then, like, how would you diagnose how he's been so far this year?
I agree with all the symptoms. I think it's the added bulk. I think it's the legs. He looks noticeably less athletic to me, generally speaking.
Mhm.
Even his block shots, he's not getting as high. He's not as mobile. But I think in the long run, that's a good thing because I do think he's better around the rim. He's a better rebounder, all those things. And I think, frankly, taking some of the athleticism out of him actually maybe reduces the number of fouls he's going to commit to because he's less all over the place and he's more in control. But I think not contesting as much on the three has something to do with that, and I think a lot of that is legs getting out there, and he's still working his way back. I think a lot of that's the scheme too, to be honest with you. Look, Thibodeau runs a lot of that drop coverage, and we even saw it last year. One big bugaboo of the Knicks defense last year when they faced bigs that could hit threes, they got a lot of open looks. And when you're going to task your big man first and foremost and second most and third most, go protect the rim, the result's going to be that big guy's getting some open threes. And I just think that's going to be a result of the way the Knicks play defense in a lot of ways. And when Myles Turner shoots that well, you're probably going to lose. And I think the Knicks will like their chances of him not being able to repeat that performance. And you don't have that many centers at that size anymore that can, stretch the floor and hit those threes. And if you do, then you have to make an adjustment. I think that's one thing if you want to get on Tibbs a little bit in this game. Why didn't he get Robinson onto Sabonis a little bit earlier and then get Randall on Turner so he can get out on those threes a little bit? I think that's something that they could have adjusted to a little bit earlier in this game. But yeah, I think otherwise, I think everything you said about Mitch has been, dead on pretty much.
Well, John, I think this is a good time to sound the final buzzer for
Sure.
this episode of Locked On Knicks, because as mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are now going to move over to the bank shot and keep talking about some of this stuff, and it just in general have some more big picture, small picture, whatever discussions about the Knicks. But before we leave Locked On Knicks and move again over to the bank shot, which you can find on all your podcast providers, just like Locked On Knicks. Do you want to take a moment to just let everybody know where to find you online and all your work? And feel free to plug your Giants work too, considering I'm sure there's plenty of crossover there.
No, I appreciate that. On Twitter at Schmelk, obviously the bank shot, it's WFN.com. You can find it on most popular podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, if you're on Android, that sort of stuff. And then if you're a Giants fan out there, I know it hasn't been the best year, but there's still a lot of games left to play. We have our Giants Podcast Network, which you can find on the Giants app, giants.com/podcast. And of course, all your favorite podcast platforms. Our two flagship ones are the Giants Huddle Podcast, which we have a bunch of interviews, long form interviews, analysts around the league, former Giants players. We do a lot of historical stuff on there. It's fun. And then we have Big Blue Kickoff Live, which much like Locked On Knicks is daily, Monday through Friday, 12:30 to 1:30. We take calls live, and then the archive goes up on the Big Blue Kickoff Live podcast feed on all those other platforms as well. So if you're a Giant fan, go check it out. It's all year round. Once we get through the season, we'll do a lot of draft stuff, which I'm really proud of our work with that. We do a good job. A lot of players to talk about. And, of course, still a lot of Giants football to be played. So I appreciate you letting me do that, Alex. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, of course. And hey, I'm sure if some people on here aren't listening to it already, they would love to have another daily Giants discussion to get into. So certainly, I keep telling myself the same thing you said as a Jets fan. There's plenty more games to go. Things can look better. The Jets just found their quarterback of the future this past weekend. So,
Boy,
things are great.
Mike White, who would have thought it?
Mike White, quarterback of the future. Just send Zach Wilson off to Siberia. Who cares? We got our guy now. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody, for listening to Locked On Knicks. I didn't plug it enough in this episode, but if you're not already, please check out the YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe there. If you wouldn't mind, leave a couple thumbs up on some of our videos. We had some extremely toxic Raptors fans in on our last one. So we only got about 50-50 on likes on our Raptors video. So,
Toxic Raptor fans, huh? Jeez.
apparently it's the saltiest fan base in the NBA. I never knew, but apparently they just roll in waves over Locked On videos that cover the Raptors in games where opposing teams face them and just leave mean
Canadians are
comments.
supposed to be nice. What the hell's going on with that, man?
I don't know. I thought the Canadians had a rep too as being super nice, and now here we are. I've been exposed to a new side of Canada. At any rate, yeah. If anybody listening, if you're listening on audio, if you want to go check out the video, you can see our nice smiling faces on YouTube. And yeah, that's it for today. We'll be back. We have at least one more game recap for you guys before the end of the week, and maybe one other pod on Friday too. Although I think we're going to be pushing something like 7 or 8 pods at that point for this week. So, maybe we'll take a break for Friday and then just come back to you on Saturday. TBD. We'll see what happens. But at any rate, thanks for listening to Locked On Knicks. We will talk to you all soon. Peace out.